What's up, Buckeye fans? It's Patrick Murphy here from Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports. Another episode of the Bucknuts Happy Hour. Just me today, no guests. I try to get a guest every week, but this week I figured you didn't want to hear too much about Rutgers, and it just didn't work out with some other people I had talked to. So we're going to do a bit of a shorter show, so you don't have to listen to me talk to myself too much here today, but we're going to address something that happened this week that I think was pretty interesting. And that is the Buckeyes coming out and stating that they want to get to the Big Ten championship game. They want to win the Big Ten championship. Now, I know that's not a shocker. That's one of the goals every year, right? But we are 2 weeks out from the Michigan game, and they don't want to talk about that yet. But they're going to talk about the Big Ten championship game and winning a Big Ten title. So we'll get to that in just a minute, and that's going to encompass some other things, including the latest on injuries, what we know, and kind of what we expect from Saturday and the players who have missed some time or could miss some time for the Buckeyes. As always, if you are watching this on YouTube, please make sure you hit that bell for notifications and the thumbs up so you get all of our videos, whether it be these podcast videos or our interviews with players. We had a bunch of those with the seniors on Wednesday night. If you are listening to this on your podcast platform of choice, please leave us a 5-star review, give us comments. All of that is very helpful. So let's get into it. So let's go back a week ago, actually, because a week ago Wednesday, Ryan Day was talking during his Wednesday lightning round after practice at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center and talked about, I think for the first time since the season has begun, he talked about it before the season. I could be mistaken there. Maybe he talked about it earlier, but it's at least been a while, talking about wanting to do something historic, win back-to-back national championships. That's kind of been obviously the story over this team this year is, can they do something that's never been done in Ohio State history? I think it's only been done, I want to say it's 9 times. It's either 9 or 7. For some reason, I get those confused. Since the 1940s, only 2 teams have done it since the start of the college football playoff era. That is Alabama during the 14. Well, both were during the 14 playoffs, obviously. Alabama and Georgia were the only 2 teams. So Ohio State has a chance this year to do something that not only hasn't been done ever in program history, which there aren't a ton of those things that have never been done in program history left to do, but also something that just doesn't happen very often. Why? It's hard. You go back to shortly before the season started, I had a podcast with one of our Georgia writers to talk about what it took that year to win back-to-back national championships. And I think the Buckeyes had, at the time, the recipe to do something similar, and I think you've seen that play out. Obviously, there's a lot more football still to be played before we know for sure if that is, in fact, what they do. But so Ryan Day set the bar by saying that. Then this week, he was asked, well, it was in the middle of a question where he was asked about the fact that the Buckeyes have won every game by 18 points. They haven't had close calls. Would they like to have been facing a little bit more adversity just to know you can do it? And then how they have sort of handled creating adversity in practice. And in the midst of talking about that, he said, we want to get to Indy, and we haven't gotten to Indy here. There's nobody on this team that's been to Indy, and they know it. And so that's the edge. Wake up in the morning every day looking to reach our goals. So whoever we play, we play. You know this is going to be a great challenge this week. We know that, and we just watch across college football every week, da-da-da-da-da. But it caught my attention because obviously they have been very week-by-week focused. But now, and not to say that they weren't, because it's still very much Rutgers week. They don't want to look ahead to Michigan, but they're putting that out there. And I think that's interesting because I think if you talk to some coaches around the country, there would be people saying, maybe we don't want to play in the Big Ten or their conference championship. It's another game. Does it give you that much? I don't know. Now, when you're in the situation where Ohio State is, you're undefeated. You are one of the top 2 teams in the conference. Undoubtedly, I think, of course, yeah, you want to play for a conference championship. That matters, right? Winning something like that matters. But to come out and say it, with 2 weeks left, I think is pretty interesting from the Buckeyes. And then that was followed up on Wednesday night when we spoke to players by a number of guys talking about, a couple of them mentioned wanting to get gold pants. And now obviously we're reflecting on this senior class before senior day on Saturday, but they mentioned the Big Ten championship game and not having played for that, not having won that. So that's a goal that very clearly has been set out by this team to get done. For various reasons, and I don't think I need to rehash them for many of you, but mostly because of losing to Michigan, the Buckeyes have not reached that goal of getting to Indianapolis, which used to be, a regular occurrence for Ohio State. I mean, we used to joke on the beat about, to schedule our hotels in Indianapolis well before, you get there. From 2017 to 2020, they were there every year. That's 4 straight. And now they haven't been there in 4 straight. And, I thought that 2021 Michigan-Iowa game and even the 2022 Michigan-Purdue game, I remember watching those games and just being like, it's odd because I'd become so used to going to the Big Ten championship game. The last 2 years, it's been less so. And this year, it's almost odd thinking about it, even more so. Last year, I guess we did the same thing. So we'll see. Obviously, the Buckeyes still have to handle their business in these next 2 games to guarantee themselves a spot in that game. And that's sort of where I want to lead into next because, so the Big Ten championship game is the focus. We want to get there, right? If you're the Buckeyes. And to do that, to make sure you are there, you have to beat Rutgers this weekend, which that should happen. But you then have to go and beat Michigan in Ann Arbor. And another thing, 4 years, haven't done that, right? To make sure you are in the best place to do that, you want to be as healthy as possible. The Buckeyes have been very healthy this season. We've talked about that on this show. Fortunate, I think, somewhat, but also there has been a lot of thought put into how they do things, in terms of the pace of play and limiting the amount of wear and tear that goes on these players' bodies in games by not playing as fast, not having as many snaps. And it's been successful. Obviously, it was successful last year. But even last year, you had injuries, right? The offensive line, you lost 2 players for the season. And they were able to overcome that and get to the college football playoff and then obviously the national championship. Well, this year, the injuries that have struck have been a little different. And the 2 names that everyone has been talking about the last week, basically, are Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Carnell Tate obviously has not played the last 2 games. Jeremiah Smith did not play the second half. He was questionable going into the game. When Ryan Day was asked about both of those players at the beginning of the week or on Tuesday, he said, our policy is we don't discuss specifics on injuries. And then once you start going down a little bit here, a little bit there, you can create a problem. And so for a number of reasons, we don't discuss those things. We put out the report on the day of the game, but I can tell you they're in great spirits. The medical staff is working hard. We'll take it day by day, see how they come in each day, but they're working hard to get back on the field. And just so you understand, we check in every day. We take the advice of the medical staff and use their feedback, and we'll go from there. So we'll continue to do that. Ryan Day also was asked later on about sort of the process of deciding guys playing, held out, all that. He talked about it is with the medical staff, it is with the coaches, but it's also with the players. Like if a player feels like he can't go, he has a say in that, right? They want to do right by these players. And obviously you need to be comfortable to play. So it's a mixed group of how you get to a decision like Saturday where Carnell Tate isn't even dressed. It's the question everyone's asking, how serious are these injuries, all that. I'm not going to pretend to know every detail about these injuries. We've reported about it on Bucknuts quite a bit. I think, the fear that either of these injuries are season ending or that, either player, Carnell Tate particularly because he didn't play last week and wasn't even dressed like he was the week before. I think that idea is, at least my understanding, is incorrect. I think I asked Ryan Day about the players being competitors themselves and having to, almost not necessarily hold them out for the betterment of themselves, but deal with guys who want to play when maybe they shouldn't, and vice versa. And he said every situation is different, but at the end of the day, it's our job to make sure that we're, one, giving great information, and then two, looking out for what's best for our guys. And that's really the best I can say. But there's always a lot of variables and a lot that goes into every situation. And so we try to do the best we can, again, to communicate and do what's best for our guys. So here's my read on this situation. I'll get into some of the other injuries here in a minute. But the Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, look, Carnell Tate's dealing with something, right? They called it tightness during the broadcast for the Purdue game when he was in uniform and on the sideline. And clearly that has led to last week Carnell Tate not playing. What's the concern level that that's going to carry on? I think that's a fair question. We without being in practice, it's tough to say. And without, having a coaching staff that elects to be more forthcoming about injuries, which I've said my piece, I think it would be helpful to, dispel some rumors and things like that for them to be more forthcoming. But I also completely understand that they're not required to. So why would they put out information that doesn't need to be known just to quiet people on message boards or social media or all that? Like, that's not Ryan Day's job. That's not the medical staff's job. So I get it. But I think Carnell Tate, legitimately hurt, in terms of hurt or not hurt. I do not believe I've been asked, did he opt out? Is he just shutting it down like Jackson Smith and Jigba, which is not what happened with Jackson Smith and Jigba either. Jackson Smith and Jigba hurt his hamstring in front of everyone watching the game, tried to come back, injured it further, and ended up being out for the rest of the year. And I don't believe that is the case here either. I believe that it's something that they're managing. And, I expect that you will see Carnell Tate again this season. It could be even as early as the Michigan game. Jeremiah Smith, obviously, I've seen a lot of speculation about what the injury is, kind of where he hurt it. Ryan Day was asked about his back when he landed hard against Illinois. And if it was something from that, he said he did not believe so. Or he said, what was the exact, I want to make sure I get this right. Well, something along those lines that he did not believe that to be the case, I think is what he said. And then he was asked if he heard it further by playing last Saturday. And Ryan Day said, again, he does not believe that was the case. So, I've seen people talk about, was it his back? Was it his knee, the way he was walking? We can guess all we want. I thought when Jeremiah Smith was on the field last week in the first half, he looked like Jeremiah Smith. Now, he wasn't on the field as much. I believe he played 22 offensive snaps. Maybe it was 20 offensive snaps. But I thought he looked like Jeremiah Smith. The one-handed catch, I watched it back to make sure I wasn't missing anything. The going in motion, running routes, I thought he looked normal. Now, I did not see him after the game. I talked about this earlier this week, but I talked to some of the other reporters who did sort of follow him up the ramp, and he was laboring. I was told it was better as he moved. So it seems like something that, he's okay moving around. Once he sits and gets stiff or something tightens up, maybe it becomes a little bit more difficult to walk. But I do, again, I think, does Jeremiah Smith play against Rutgers? I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't. But I think that they fully hope, at the very least, that he'll be back for that Michigan game. And if you remember, think back to late July when there were quotes coming out about Jeremiah Smith talking about how he won't lose to Michigan again during his Ohio State career. He doubled down on that at Big Ten Media Days. Like, this guy cares about this game and he wants to win. So I believe when Ryan Day says they're working hard to get back both of those players, it is with that Michigan game in mind. These are not the only two. I know they've been the most talked about, but CJ Donaldson was in uniform but did not play. I know there's been a lot of talk about CJ Donaldson and other running backs and whatnot. And obviously the Buckeyes had arguably their best rushing day of the season. Statistically, it was the best of Big Ten play against a bad, let's be honest, UCLA rush defense. But good to see. CJ Donaldson was not a part of that. But I still think CJ Donaldson has a role in that short yardage situation. So I think that was something that got asked about on Wednesday. Ryan Day said that CJ had practiced this week. Now, here's the thing that I think is funny. We don't talk about injuries, except when we do talk about injuries, like a guy like CJ Donaldson. He's okay talking about that, which again, I think is funny. Now that is, to be fair, that is, was he in practice? Was he not in practice? But I imagine if you asked Ryan Day about Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, Ryan Day said he'd been strong this week after missing last week's game, strong in practice this week. But I imagine if you asked him about that, he would decline to comment. So CJ Donaldson sounds like he'll be back. Julian Sayin, who did not miss any snaps with the first team offense on Saturday, but definitely hurt that ankle, said after the game it wasn't something that affected him, even though he had one of his worst passing days. I wrote about that on Bucknuts earlier this week. If you want to go read that, I kind of broke down why I thought the passing game was not at its best. Ryan Day said that Julian had a full week of practice after injuring that ankle, so looks like he will be fine for that game. But I thought Lincoln-Holtz looked good, granted, limited time. And then there were guys like Caleb Downs, some other guys that got pulled out early. Caleb Downs didn't play the whole second half like Jeremiah Smith. That has not been talked about nearly as much as Jeremiah Smith, probably because the cameras didn't focus on him limping around on the sideline. I don't know if Caleb Downs was limping around at all. It could just be coincidence that they both came out at the half. They pulled out a lot of the defensive starters, especially. They probably would have pulled the offensive starters out earlier if you hadn't had the Lorenzo Styles kick return touchdown and the offense had come out on that drive. So I think that all of this is done with a look at the Michigan game and that Big Ten championship game we were talking about. Like, I think that is what the Buckeyes are solely focused on, is being as healthy as you possibly can for that game coming up. It's all that matters right now for them is to get to Indy and win a Big Ten championship. Now, that doesn't mean you look past this game. That doesn't mean that, you can sit out guys. I did see it suggested, well, if Julian's ankle's bothering him, just play Lincoln, play a decent amount of the backup linemen, run the ball, that type of thing. Well, and I talked about this on our instant reaction show on Tuesday. If you are the Buckeyes and you are worried that, okay, what if Carnell Tate re-injures something or gets a different injury? What if Jeremiah, what if one of these guys misses any time in a college football playoff game or against Michigan or in the Big Ten championship game? You want Julian Sayin to look to have as close to the same type of chemistry as he has with those guys, with Mylan Graham, with Bryson Rogers, with Quincy Porter, because those are going to be the guys. Apologies, my alarm went off there. Those are going to be the guys who have to step in. And if they have to step in a big game like that, then I think this is an opportunity, assuming Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate either don't play against Rutgers or don't play as much. This is an opportunity to build some of those in-game reps. And you saw some of that play against Rutgers. You saw some of that against UCLA last week, and it was a mixed bag. Like, there were some good throws to Mylan Graham. There were some really bad throws to Mylan Graham. There was a bad throw to Jeremiah Smith, to be fair. There was the touchdown to Bryson Rogers. There was a good completion to Quincy Porter. There was one that wasn't so good. So the idea that you just, run the ball or sit out Julian Sayin just because you're worried, I think it could be a disservice to you later in the season if you need those guys. Now, ideally, you hope Jeremiah Smith, Carnell take it back. You're as close to full strength as you can be, but you need those guys reps. And like even Caleb Downs, like bringing him out in the second half allowed you to take a look at some things. Fahim Delane came in for Caleb Downs on that first drive of the second defensive drive of the second half. Then they went to Lorenzo Styles playing as a deeper safety and had Devin Sanchez in there. I know Devin Sanchez has been a big talking point because, let's be honest, things haven't been great for him. And, he got roasted a couple times in that game. But these are big learning experiences for a young player who is going to be your future at cornerback, I believe. Has it been perfect? No, but it's been kind of trial by fire with him this year. And, he's had some good plays. He's had some not so good plays. And at least he's getting this experience. And so, but it allowed you, it's not just on the offensive side. I forgot to mention Josh Padilla. He's a guy who I would expect to be back, after practice on Wednesday when we go in to do our Wednesday evening interviews with the players and the Ryan Day lightning round. A lot of the guys are still walking off. Josh Padilla looked to be moving okay from what I saw, which I don't think was the case 2 weeks ago, or a week ago. So, that's a guy, and I wrote today, you can read on Bucknuts about sort of the right guard situation with Tegra Shabola, Josh Padilla. Maybe throw Gabe Van Sickle in there after I thought he played pretty well on Saturday as the rotational guy with Tegra. So Josh Padilla coming back is a boost. You have to get these guys reps where you can, right? Because, we hear it all the time from Buckeye fans that, especially specifically the quarterback position, but I remember it with Kyle McCord. Well, he didn't get the reps. He didn't get real reps, so he's not ready. Well, that applies to every position. And I think this is an opportunity to do that if guys have to miss. Now, you don't want that. You want guys to be fully healthy or as close to fully healthy as you can be. But again, everything is with an eye on what's going to happen next week against Michigan, assuming you beat Rutgers, which you should. You're a 30-plus point favorite. And then the Big Ten championship game. And getting that Big Ten championship ring, most likely being the number one seed in the playoff, getting that first-round bye and going from there. As for the Rutgers game, since I brought it up, and as I mentioned, this is a shorter version of the show, partially because I'm by myself, partially because I need to get to Ohio State basketball tonight. Look, it's a 5-5 Rutgers team. They've got 2 wins in the Big Ten. If the Buckeyes take the same type of approach that they have throughout the season, every opponent, kind of that mindless, faceless opponent, then this should not be a game. It should look probably similar to the UCLA game. If Julian Sand is on point, it could be even worse for Rutgers than it was for UCLA. I talked about the rushing or the offensive line play. The rushing got going last week. Well, this is another opportunity. Even worse statistically, rush defense. I think you can have some more good runs, some more good plays in that department. And that just builds confidence. Is it going to be as easy against a Michigan or an Indiana or someone in the playoff? No. Running the ball will be more difficult. But that confidence that you can do it, building good habits, all of those things against another Big Ten opponent, these are Big Ten teams, will certainly help you down the road, I think. So that, the defense continuing to play the way it does, all of these things, if you just do what you've done all season, I see no reason why the Buckeyes don't roll Rutgers as they did UCLA a week ago. These should be 2 pretty much tune-up games heading into that game against Michigan. Not quite the SEC in some of the games they play this week, but the schedule worked out well, we'll say, for Ohio State and in that aspect. And obviously we'll get to the Michigan game and everything next week. It is interesting, and we can talk about this more next week, but Ohio State is maintaining its normal game week routine in terms of what they do with the media, which has not been the case in the past. Usually we have one day of media over at the Woody to kind of get whoever is available, usually Ryan Day or Urban Meyer before him. Jim Tressel, I wasn't around for that, but Jim Tressel with them go all, and then you have players and whatnot. This week they're doing it just like they normally have. Tuesday, Ryan Day, Wednesday, players, and a lightning round with Ryan Day. So my understanding is Ryan Day wants to try and keep this routine that has worked so well for the Buckeyes each week the same as much as possible. And so the night before Thanksgiving, we're going to be working, but love to do it. Anyway, headline on Saturday night, Sunday morning, whenever you pull up Bucknuts or open the newspaper or whatever, Buckeyes handle business against Rutgers, set up matchup with Michigan. And the intriguing thing with this is Michigan, in order to make this a winner goes to the Big Ten championship game, Michigan has to beat Maryland. They are at Maryland. That game is at 4 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. You would expect Michigan to handle that. Maryland is 4-6 and 1-6 in the Big Ten. They've lost 6 straight games, including 2 Rutgers, including 2 UCLA. So you would expect Michigan to be fine. But if Michigan were to lose, that does open the door a little bit for Ohio State to have a little bit more leeway against Michigan. I think the Buckeyes would rather it be, hey, let's have everything on the line and let's go handle our business in Ann Arbor and, basically ruin Michigan's hopes of reaching a Big Ten championship game. That would be, I think that, speaking of competitors earlier, I think that would be the way Ohio State would prefer it. But whatever it is, as I said off the top, they want to be in Indy. That is the goal. So we'll see. This will be another step. I think it should be no issue for the Buckeyes to handle it. And I think you'll be talking about another Buckeye win Saturday night. I apologize that this is a little shorter. If I had more time, I would have gone longer, would have had a guest, all that stuff. But we'll be back next week. Obviously, big one with the Michigan game. We'll have Alejandro Zuniga from our Michigan site on. I always like talking to Alejandro about the Wolverines, catching up with him on how things have gone this year. There's a fair amount of questions I have to ask him about the Wolverines. So anyway, Buckeye fans, thank you for tuning in. Remember, if you were watching this on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button. Please turn on notifications so you get all of our YouTube videos, 5-star review on podcasts. Leave a comment. Cheers.